Section 702 of the Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Act, or FISA, is an important tool for gathering foreign intelligence and keeping America safe. But this authority of the government also serves as a backdoor for warrantless surveillance of Americans right here at home. The Trump administration, led by Stephen Miller, has asked Congress for a no-strings-attached extension of Section 702. There is a growing bipartisan recognition of the need to reform this surveillance tool to protect American privacy and civil liberties. Section 702 allows the government to collect the private communications of foreigners overseas without a warrant issued by a court. The problem is that millions, potentially billions, of innocent American communications with friends, family members, or co-workers abroad are being swept up in this collection. Once collected, the government can read Americans' private text, emails, and messages, and even listen to phone calls without ever obtaining a warrant from a judge. To no one's surprise, without court approval for such searches, administrations of both parties have abused Section 702 to spy on American families, including the families of protesters, members of Congress, journalists, and even women on dating apps and rental tenants. We have every reason to believe that such abuses will continue, if not get worse, under the Trump administration, as it is using every tool at its disposal to target political enemies and undermine the basic underpinnings of our democracy. Last year, the Trump administration conducted more than 23,000 warrantless searches of Americans' private phone calls, texts, and emails. And these are just the ones we know about. Every member of Congress should also be concerned about the increase in so-called sensitive queries, close quote, conducted by the FBI under Kash Patel's leadership. These are warrantless searches of Section 702 data that target religious leaders, organizations, politicians, political organizations, and journalists. In 2025, the FBI conducted over 3 times as many sensitive queries as the Biden administration in 2024. We don't know who the FBI has targeted using these sensitive queries, but we know under Kash Patel's leadership, the FBI has been all too willing to target political enemies to appease President Trump. The Trump administration also refuses to release the latest FISA court ruling on Section 702, which found, quote, deficiencies, close quote, with how the administration is conducting searches on Americans. Rather than telling the American people what those deficiencies in the program are, the Trump administration is appealing the court's ruling. The American people deserve to see this opinion before their House members and Senate members vote on reauthorizing Section 702. Senator Lee is a conservative Republican from Utah. He and I are working together. We have proposed a path forward with the bipartisan SAFE Act, which would reauthorize Section 702 for 3 years while including critical reforms to protect Americans' constitutional right. Our bill would require the government to obtain a judicial warrant before accessing American citizens' text, emails, or phone calls that the government has collected using Section 702. This would ensure independent, nonpartisan oversight of the government's use of this surveillance approach and stop this never-ending cycle of misuse under 702. Our warrant would protect Americans' privacy without jeopardizing national security. We have expressly included robust exceptions for legitimate security needs, including for what is known as exigent circumstances, where there is any threat to life and agents have no time to obtain a warrant. That, of course, is the response when we talk about changing this system. You're going to slow it down when we need it the most. There could be an emergency and we have to move. We wrote expressly in our amendment that exigent circumstances could move forward in the state of emergency. The SAFE Act would also put an end to the government's practice of buying our personal data from third-party data brokers without a warrant. The Department of Homeland Security has reportedly used this loophole to track protesters in real time under the pretext that they're, quote, domestic terrorists, close quote. Do you remember the two individuals killed in Minneapolis by ICE? One of them was identified on the spot as a domestic terrorist. Totally untrue. If the government wants to spy on Americans, excuse me, it needs to get a warrant, court approval. It's based on what we know as the Constitutional's Fourth Amendment protection, period. That's why our amendment, our bipartisan amendment, is supported by conservative Republicans and progressive Democrats alike. The Senate could take up the SAFE Act and vote on it this week, and I hope we do. I believe there is broad bipartisan support for this bipartisan measure by Senator Lee and myself. Congress should also address the ill-advised expansion of Section 702 that allows its use for surveillance of non-citizens traveling in the United States. This provision may be the reason Stephen Miller is the White House leading advocate for reauthorizing Section 702. He reportedly views 702 as, quote, critical to a variety of homeland security missions. What could that possibly be? Immigration in the United States, even though this section is expressly focused on foreign intelligence abroad. If a reauthorization bill reaches the floor of the Senate, I will pursue an amendment to limit the government's ability to use Section 702 for President Trump's mass deportation campaign. Some may argue that there's not enough time to enact reforms before Section 702 expires. False. 702 surveillance operates under year-long certifications approved by the FISA court. Even if Section 702 were to expire this week, the law makes it clear that surveillance may continue until March of next year. There is no emergency excusing Congress from getting this right. This affects the privacy, potentially, of every American family. I'll vote against any long-term extension of Section 702 that gives this administration, or any administration, unfettered access to America's communications without a warrant. I urge my colleagues to do the same, and I yield the floor.